Great. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone who's dialed in so far. We're going to be kicking off very shortly. We'll just give it another minute or so to let people find where their links are and log in and all of that good stuff. But we'll kick off very shortly. If you're not familiar with who we are, just as a reminder, it's this is a learn more session where everyone who's dialing into this call can get armed a little bit better, who are hopefully trying to apply for the opportunity with our wonderful partners at the Phoenix Comic, of which I'm joined by two of the team here today. The deadline for that is the 12th of November. So you've still got very much some time to put together your portfolio, but hopefully you'll leave this webinar and this call armed with a bit more information about what the team are looking for and how to apply, and hopefully answer and get to a few more insightful questions about how they work and their process and things like that. So we already had some questions that were submitted by folks that have signed up for this Learn More session. So what we'll do is we'll try and address some of those in the conversation throughout, but please know that there's a Q&A function. So as we're talking along, and if there are questions that we haven't answered, feel free to drop those into the Q&A, and anyone else can upvote a question that they like the sound of by using the thumbs up icon. And then there's a small portion at the end of this session where we'll try and get to those questions. If there are any really pressing questions or lots of similar questions, then we will actually answer those offline and get some responses from the team, and we'll send those through via email. Just a little bit about Creative Access in case anyone's not aware. We're a social enterprise, and we're all about making the creative industries more representative of what the UK looks like today. So that means working with talented individuals and employers like the Phoenix to offer various different things, from career inspiration to internships, jobs, opportunities, training at all different points of your career. So just make sure that you're following us on all our social media channels and staying in contact, so that you're always up to speed with our latest and greatest offerings. We'll share links to some of our social channels just in the chat pane now. But right, so we've got a good number of people on the call now. So we're just going to do brief intros around who we've got from the Phoenix team, and then we'll get started off with questions. So Siobhan, did you want to kick off?
Yeah, I'm Siobhan. I work as a designer slash illustrator slash schedule manager slash probably a few other things at the Phoenix, and I've been there for about 2 years now, I think. Yeah, it's me.
Awesome. And Joe?
My name is Joe. I'm on the editorial team at the Phoenix. My job title is head of stories, which sort of means that I'm kind of in charge of building the list and working with our artists and illustrators along with the editorial team and the design team and the art team to bring out, I think, what I hope is the best in our creators and get them into the Phoenix and get them out to kids.
Awesome. Great. So we've got both sides of the coin represented in this session, which is brilliant. We're going to get straight into the main reason why people are here, which is understanding a little bit more about what exactly you're looking at in people's applications, and what's going to help people stand out among, other folks that might be applying, or what it is exactly, just trying to distill, whether it's from a design and editorial perspective, that you're hoping comes across within applications. I'll ask a few more kind of prompting questions and nudge you to get more information out of you, but I'll just put that broad question to you both initially, and just have you comment on what it is that you're looking for in that submission when people hit send.
Well, what we're looking for the Phoenix is what we publish in the Phoenix, I guess, is the place to start, are just stories that we love, stories we wish existed when we were kids, stories that our authors and artists and contributors wish existed when they were kids, but also stories that we just love now, which is, I know, is a really kind of broad remit and kind of hard to sink your teeth into. just great stories, right? But I think there's lots of ways to kind of dig into that in terms of like, what are the specifics of a story? What are the things that make a great story? What are the things we've published? We love things that are funny. We love things that are beautiful. We love things that are wonderful and fantastical. But to really gear into kid life and kid love and kid interest and what would just bring, make a kid's eyes shine bright with wonder and possibility. To speak to a specific point, Ella, that you mentioned about how to stand out, I think there's two broad things to kind of say about that. One of them is a lot of the ways that make something stand out aren't necessarily in your control. When, from the perspective of an editor, when you're going through a big stack, sometimes just the order that you get to something could have a lot of influence, and there's lots of things that you can't control. But things that you can is to what I really love is when you're able to kind of distill the story to that really nice grain of what makes it exciting. Like when you tell a friend what you're working on, you can either see them lean in or kind of like fog out in their eyes. And if you're able to kind of get us quick with a this is what it is, and then get us to kind of want to read more and get really interested, that would be the thing. And what is the core of that story that you can really bring in your pitch, if that's at all helpful?
Yeah, that's a great start. And then I guess, Siobhan, you would kind of probably support all of that, but more specifically, we had a lot of questions from people around, does it need to be, do I need to be using a certain type of platform for the illustration? Do I need to be, is Adobe essential at this stage, or what is it that you're looking to see, both from a illustrative and kind of editorial standpoint? Like what's the kind of level?
From an illustration standpoint, we always want to see like a unique look or something that like we'd never really seen before, which is harder and harder to get by these days, obviously. But with regards to sorry, my voice is slowly going. With regards to platform, it's way more flexible than it was back when I was starting out as an illustrator, where if you didn't have Adobe, you didn't really have a chance in the industry. Whereas nowadays we work with people who work with various softwares, including myself, because I am much more like averse to Procreate than I am Adobe. I don't really like a lot of the Adobe things, even though that is industry standard, but we work a lot with people who work with Clip Studio Paint. If you access to like a great scanner, I have no reason why you couldn't scan in your inks and work from that. We're much more flexible in the industry than we used to be. So I would say platform wise is not something to overthink. We more want to see your style and your artwork because that's your unique voice. And I think that's the most important thing from an illustration perspective for me anyway.
Yeah, perfect. And we obviously said within the application, just getting down to like the nitty gritty, like we want, a page of sketched draft. We also want a colored image to see drawing ability, and within that first page of sketch draft, we want written script alongside that. In terms of talking more about the humor side of things, that's a slightly more difficult one to distill, but one thing that you say on your website and that comes through in the comic itself is that humor is really central. Is there anything that you would comment about, like perhaps, Joe, from your side, putting yourself in the headspace of a 7 to 14-year-old and kind of what works for them, or maybe just talking a little bit about what successful comics and ideas have come about so far that you're really proud of?
Yeah, I think in terms of humor, yes, it's so important. And like, if I said we're looking for anything, but like, it's one of the hardest things to find is always really good humor for kids. And it's one of the things that kids really, really love is to laugh. And it's a surprisingly slim number of the submissions we receive are comedies. I think with humor, as with all things, my advice to any author is to not get too caught up in thinking about writing for kids. Like this is very debatable and everybody has their own opinions on this. But my kind of sense is the idea of what confines a children's literature there's some obvious censorship things, like things we just don't want to talk to kids about or are inappropriate. So don't send us things that aren't appropriate to kids. So, we do like to push the envelope a little bit. But the and the other thing is just, and their interests, like kids have a particular set of interests and a way of approaching the world. But to remember when you're sending something in, that like kids have such sophisticated worldviews, they have such complicated world worldviews, they have such complicated social networks that they're having to navigate in different ways. And kid life is sometimes scary in ways that we just forget. And so it's hard to say exactly what this means in practice, but we really try not to talk down to kids, but to give something that really is theirs at their level. And fundamentally, I don't think that's massively different from how you speak to a grown-up. It's just really honoring their humanness, their full existence of a self. And I think from there you find they're able to engage really deeply in stories in ways that I think we even forget how to do as adults.
Perfect. Is there anything that you would say, Siobhan, either on the humour side or projects or specific strips that you're really proud of that you think work really well?
I don't have anything really to add to what Joe said, because it's basically, I was just going to echo, like, it's just not speaking down to kids, it's speaking like on the level of kids, and that's like, again, not that far from speaking to an adult. So it's like, I think if you overthink it and you're overconscious about it, then you're going to speak down to a kid, and that's never what you want to do, especially if you're coming across like from a humorous side. So yeah, it pretty much is echoing what Joe said, really.
Brilliant. There were some specific questions as well around how people include some of their references to portfolio. So you're obviously looking for the full page that has to represent a sketch draft and editorial copy, and then the coloured image. Some people are asking around things that they can point to. So you would also like or accept people to point to perhaps social media outlets where perhaps that demonstrates some of their portfolio, and yeah, anywhere else that where their work exists, that's kind of all acceptable or helpful.
I don't want to speak for you, Joe. I believe that's absolutely fine as long as you're showing like your understanding of sequential art. I believe any platform, again, is absolutely fine, whatever you're most comfortable with. I've always personally found social media quite hard to convey sequential artwork, but if you have a formula that works that you can show it through that, then I think that's absolutely fine and great, really.
Yeah, I think to really underline something Siobhan just said about showing skill and telling stories sequentially, in a page of roughs, to really, one of the first things we always look at is do the potential contributor have a real sense of how to tell a story in the comic form, which is its own art, its own media. It's and some people are better at it than others, and it is a skill you can learn. And we do work with some people who still have a lot to learn, that we saw potential in other ways. But yeah, I think it's really about, I think seeing social media is fine and showing an existing history of work. But really we want to see, how do you tell a story? How do you draw a picture? And how is it going to be to work with you? Those are the probably main questions outside of what is the specific pitch.
Fantastic. And I think it's important also to reiterate that this is an opportunity that's for people who are underrepresented within the creative industries. We define that on our FAQ page under eligibility, but it includes but isn't limited to Black, Asian, ethnically diverse candidates, those who identify as disabled, so including those who may be neurodivergent, those undergoing gender reassignment or transitioning, and individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So if you didn't catch all of that really quick blurb that I just spoke about, you can also have a look on our FAQs page of our website. But that's who this scheme is particularly reaching out to. I thought that was just worth reiterating for anyone who was unsure of that point. I want to just quickly touch on what people can expect if they are successful at being selected. how they can expect to work with you and what might be required, what that process looks like in terms of development. And then we'll touch on just after that, like what your processes internally look like. So I think that there were loads of questions about people being curious about how your team works and how it's set up and all that kind of stuff. But if I can just get you guys to paint a picture of how you might work with rising talent who you've just newly selected as a winner of this opportunity. Maybe if I put that to Siobhan first.
I think that actually might be better for Joe to answer that, because it probably start with editorial rather than the design team. So it might.
Good to know. Brilliant.
Well, it's sort of different for everyone, and we've always organized a process around the person we're working with. And it really starts with the interest, aptitudes, needs of the person. Often we'll put together a team based on what on our side, and sometimes even with combining artists or whatever to make the story the best. The goal is to make a great story, and we work to do that. Now, how that actually works in practice is depending on where the starting point is, and some of these steps can be skipped. But you know, starting with sort of a pitch or an idea of what a story or concept would be, and then going to a script where it's written down, that we read the script and we talk about the script, and then looking at roughs or pencils, just kind of like reasonably quick sketches to get a sense of layout and dialogue flow and composition, and the thing Siobhan mentioned earlier, the sense of how the story is going to be told sequentially. And then once that's all, signing off each of those steps, then the final step would say, now we need final art. And then we, under the umbrella of the whole thing, is we'd probably say, okay, for this initial pilot run of the Phoenix, it's going to be one episode, and we're going to need it for this day, and it's going to be published in this time. And then we publish it. We send you a copy, and then if we commission more, then we kind of start over again and do the same thing from there. I think, does that kind of answer the sort of process? But it's a lot of conversations, Zoom conversations. If you're local and you can come in person, it's always wonderful to meet in person, but we absolutely don't require that for a variety of reasons.
And just for everyone's benefit, the Phoenix comic team are based in Oxford, in England. And if the person who were to be successful did want to physically travel into that space, that it would be on a case-by-case basis that we'd be able to cover your travel expenses to Oxford. So just let that be known as well. So that's quite a cool thing to be aware of. Anything else that you'd add to the process, Siobhan?
No, just breaking down the process further, like usually like it does start with a pitch and the concept. Design sometimes comes much later on, but it does depend on the individual. When we're looking at it like schedule wise, we're looking at a number of pages, blah, 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 like laying out time for each individual stage. So that would, just repeating what Joe said, starts often with roughs, then going over roughs, making sure each panel makes sense and conveys the story in the best way. Then it will probably go to inks, and then once inks are approved, then it'll probably go to color and lettering, and then we would polish the pages off ready for a publication. So that's like just a breakdown of step by step once the pitch and the concept of the story is all signed off, and the script of the story is all signed off as well. But yeah,
awesome, brilliant. And I'm also going to call you guys out on any industry terms that I think could maybe do with any more explanation. You talked about creating things sequentially or sequencing. Obviously, that I'm presuming that refers to where you're telling a story chronologically. And you also talk about roughs quite a lot. So yeah, just demystifying those a little.
Yeah, I mean, I could start with the roughs one. Roughs is basically where you're working out panel by panel, like what the best angle is, the roughs of the character, like still using the word roughs, the pencils basically.
It's all, yeah, pencils, rough, sketches.
Sketches, pencils, working out the best angles, like to tell the story in the best way. So if something doesn't quite work, you haven't like inked anything down in final, it still can be moved. So it's still a very heavy editing stage. So yeah, just pencils of each panel and each page is what
it's just kind of the understanding that when you're figuring out how these go, when you're writing like a prose story, it's fairly straightforward to delete a word and put in a new word, right? And the process of editing a prose story would be there'd be an assumption of making changes. But art it takes a lot longer to draw a picture than it does to write a word. So the first stages would be kind of minimizing that time in order to nail down what can change and what doesn't want to change. So when you go to the more labor intensive, harder to change elements like drawing it in ink and adding colors, and really laying up the files ready for application, that we're not going to be making changes at those final stages, because that's a huge amount of work. And
It's
so
an
we really
illustrator's
work to
worst
avoid that.
nightmare is to get feedback when you've done the colors and the inks and being like, I want to change this panel, and it's like,
Oh no.
Yeah,
we
it's always
do the rough stage.
I bet there could be a whole series of like designer nightmare scenarios, couldn't there? Things that are really
It's why the
problematic.
rough stage exists, so
Yeah.
that never really happens. Like, we do take that stage like very seriously, and so it's much easier later on.
And with
Brilliant.
everyone, not just this rising new people or people who aren't as experienced, like we work in a lot of detail for all the artists, from people who are just starting with us to people who are very experienced, because it's our idea that stories should be scrutinized and developed to get them to their highest potential. So this isn't just something for new people. This is something we do with everyone. This is the normal editorial process that we would hopefully to invite at least one of you out there to join us in.
Brilliant. So we're just going to do a really quick sense of like what a day in either of your lives looks like, or maybe just talking about the arc of idea to end. And then we've got tons of questions from people, really good questions, so we'll get to those as well. But yeah, maybe just giving people a sense of like what does your day-to-day look like? How do you work with each other, and who do you work with?
Do you want me to go first? I can go first.
Yeah, go for it.
As it's quite clear, I work remote at the Phoenix. I'm not always in the office. So a lot of my day is I will start with calls and talks in the morning with various people from different departments, because I manage the schedule as well. I need to check in with all our freelance artists, any letterers, any colorists, anyone who's got a deadline coming up, to make sure that they're comfortable, if they've got all the feedback that they need. If they haven't, to then get in contact with anyone in the office to make sure everything's flowing in a nice productive manner. That's usually my morning. The afternoon, I am also like a designer and illustrator, so usually in the afternoon it will be design work, which is often like layout and the technical side of the Phoenix, so putting the comic together, making sure everything's in the correct format and everything looks correct, and laying that out and doing different pages which we see in the Phoenix, like we call it the ink spot page. It's like the puzzle page, like making sure things like that are done for the Phoenix. And then my afternoon is, at the moment, very heavy illustration, because we're working on some new strips and we're doing character design. So my afternoon will often be coloring up some comic pages, or at the moment doing turnarounds for a new character that's going to be in a new series, and working on people and props around with them. But the day can vary so significantly because of all those three things. Like, I could have a whole day of scheduling one day, or at the minute just a whole day of coloring comics and nothing else. So yeah, that's an average day, I guess, for me.
Well, that's exciting. That's
so
Pandora.
cool.
Is that Pandora you're designing?
That is Pandora.
That's very
yeah.
exciting. Cool. Very excited to see that. Anyway, sorry.
Very cool. And just quickly, Joe, give us a sense of what your day looks like.
It's similarly varied. I think the main things that I kind of work on are so like this morning I read a few scripts for a series that we're doing called Thingamajigs, about objects that come to life. So I read a couple of those scripts, and I'll feedback on that, and have lots of meetings with different editors to kind of talk through stories. So before we talk to any contributor, we usually talk through the stories amongst us to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. And a lot of energy is actually goes into, as an editor, making sure that we speak to contributors effectively and sensitively, because the understanding that you put a ton of work into this, and so to come in and be like rah, 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 change that, as opposed to what are we doing, what's our goal, how do we refine this together. So we always have like pre-meetings. I'm also a writer on the Phoenix, so I write a couple of strips, and today I had about an hour, two different meetings about two different properties I'm working on, that we got roughs for. One was a script, and I got feedback from Tom, who's our editor-in-chief, on those. And then kind of beyond that, it's talking to contributors, which sometimes is yesterday I talked to someone for an hour, of which about 10 minutes was about the strip. Mostly we were just talking about our lives and connecting and talking about our insecurities and all that kind of stuff. And then thinking about strategy, like where are we going as a company and what new things do we want to develop? And then amazing things like this, where we get to talk to all of you wonderful folks out there. Yeah, so that's kind of what it looks like. This is what the office looks like. We're in a basement. I don't want to, a coats. And that door goes nowhere. So ignore the fire escape sign. It's just kind of like, yeah, we work in a basement in Oxford. It's kind of the
it's good. Yeah, good to
the whole thing.
Good to peel back the curtain on what it
yeah, we have some boxes that we haven't unpacked since we moved, and Tom's suggestion was we should just write danger on all the boxes, so at least we feel like but yeah.
Right, I'm going to do some quick fire questions. So we'll try and get through as many of these as possible. There's about 3 or 4 that are sort of some grouped questions, similar ones that we've had. First one, in relation to portfolios, would proof of improvement over the years be recommended, or should the portfolio only be like the highest quality of work that you can produce? So like, how much is too much to include in a portfolio? Do you just want, people selecting a final piece, or do you kind of want like a little bit of like a backstory? What's your preference?
I'm always interested in, I don't know if Joe disagrees with this, I'm always interested in seeing the backstory, because a piece of work that you think is the most polished, most fantastic thing that you've ever done, I probably would agree with that. However, I could look at something you've done in the past, being like, well, that's absolutely fantastic. And whilst it is good to create your own work, sometimes you can over-create your work. And then you can cut out something that someone in the Phoenix might see and be like, wow, that's incredible. So I would say create it, don't include everything. Like I wouldn't include like a drawing on a napkin I've done. Like that's not something I would include, but I wouldn't overthink or overcreate my work to only being the most recent thing I've done in like the last month.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we wouldn't necessarily assume it was improvement. We'd assume that everything is a high quality. So that would be the warning, or the kind of thing about that is we wouldn't necessarily see your portfolio as a journey, because I think we'd assume that everybody can grow and everybody changes as an artist over time. But like Siobhan said, and a lot of the artists we work with in the past, people, you get self-conscious of the old stuff and you forget. I think as an artist, it's really easy to forget how magical art is to people who can't draw. And I'm constantly amazed by things. An artist will say, this is terrible. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is extraordinary what you can do. And just because you're, this is maybe you at 90% and now you're working at 100%, that doesn't mean the 90% isn't still wonderful. So, but include things that you think we'd be interested to see. And I think that story of how you've grown and developed is something that can come out as we get to know you.
Brilliant. 2 design questions back to back. Sorry, illustration questions back to back. One being, I'm quite a traditional artist, so I'm hoping that that's okay, not just, digital or cartoon in style. And then there's another one that says, in the ad, it says that we're looking for 4-panel shorts as well as longer formats. Is there a preference? I think my strengths are in the shorter sequences. So maybe weighing in on both those things. Just a reminder, that first question was around digital versus traditional.
Yeah, I think there is, if you're able to look at a copy of the Phoenix, then, and I think we talked about being able to send out a digital copy to people. Yeah. So you'll kind of see the range of styles we have in the Phoenix, and I think there are styles that might fit outside of that. What I'll say about that is style isn't necessarily the deciding factor if we want to publish it, but there's kind of a range that feels Phoenixy to us. And that said, there's some stuff, there's Thingamajigs, the one I referenced before, is actually quite illustratory, and where I would be more interested in the corner of that question is that drawing comics takes a really long time, because you'll do 8 drawings in a page, 15 different people, backgrounds, all this stuff. So when I hear illustrator, I do tend to assume kind of something that takes more time. And just to keep in mind that the rate of pay we can offer is based on the page rather than the time. So if you're doing a really intricate, complicated style, it will probably slow you down. But we're open to all styles. It's just kind of, it's a question of it's just a question of how will it work and how will it look, and really how does it serve the story, and vice versa.
And then perhaps Siobhan, if you've got a comment about somebody was asking about preference around formats, saying that we wanted a 4-panel short as well as longer formats. Someone saying that their style is more towards shorter sequences. Does that, are you open to that, short, like with the shorter sequences, or do you want to see something that's like a fully fledged story?
I believe we're open to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, we are open to the shorter ones as well. Like, short, play to your strengths for sure. If you're panels is like, I can do amazing comedy in 4 panels, but in page I struggle, work to your strength and do a 4-panel comic. That would be incredible still.
Yeah, I would say minimum would be about a tier, maybe, or a single panel, really. Like, we'd be open to that. And then for this, we do publish things in longer graphic novels, but to think of it as maybe capping at 4 A4 pages for now would be a good place to start. But that's not a rule. That's just kind of a guideline. If your story is sweeping and that's where you want to be and that's where you're going to work on, share that and bring us along on your
I think it'll help if you do look at the digital version of the Phoenix when you receive it, because you will see like we've got like a dedicated shorts page, and those are like 3-4 panels, but their comedy is like spot on. They're really, really funny. But then we do have like our epic 4 pages, which I believe Joe is just referring to. So 4 A4 pages, which like tell much longer story. Either they could be comedy based, they could be much more serious. But if you look at those, you'll see this broke down structure of like how the Phoenix works really, and how where you might be able to fit in with how you tell the story.
Awesome. Right, so we've gone just slightly over time. That if everyone's able to stay on for just about 30 more seconds, I think the final question was just around whether people whether Joe or Siobhan had recommendations for resources or anything online that folks can look at to just flex their skills and upskill a little bit and just and improve their abilities. Like, would you have a recommendation of any tools or resources online, or obviously reading the Phoenix, or if there's anything else that people should take a look at? It's more skills based. Any resources, or even anything that's like non-traditional, that's not directly related to comics, whether it's a podcast or something like that.
Gosh, I don't even know.
I can't think of anything personally off the top of my head. However, I'd be more than happy to. I believe we're going to provide some answers to some questions we didn't get around to potentially provide some links from there once like looking into it. We know that there are some out there.
And you've probably got lots of like tabs and various things saved of things that really help you guys, so we'll definitely tackle that one offline.
And I mean, just, this is probably an annoyingly vague answer to that too, but what we're really interested in is your taste and your experience and your story. And if it's a matter, if we're excited by that, then and it catches our excitement and we feel like it fits, then we can also work with us as a resource as well to help develop the craft around that story. But it's always about the story. It's always about the storyteller, and the experience of the readers is the first and most exciting thing. And so where you look for inspiration is just as important as where you look for craft and resource for us.
What a great line to end on. What I've done, everyone, is I've just re-popped the link to apply in the chat pane, so hopefully everyone can see that. Have a look out in your emails. We will be sending a follow-up with links to various things, so we'll be reminding you of how you apply, so that link, a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as a transcript, and we will in the next few days look to come back to other various pressing questions via written means. So do keep an eye on your email inbox. And one other really important thing to have a look at in that email is we're going to be sending out a feedback link. This really helps us to improve and make sure that these sessions that we run in and around any opportunities in the future are really, really useful and help support you in the best way possible. So please do feedback. It really does help us improve. But also just wanted to say thank you so much to Joe and Siobhan for joining us today at Creative Access. It's been a really informative session, and everyone I think who joined initially is still on the call. So hopefully everyone was able to take things away from this that they didn't already know or join knowing. But yeah, just wanted to say a big thank you to you both at the Phoenix Comic. This is a really exciting opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're really excited to see what you guys have.
Awesome. And just a reminder to everyone else that the deadline to apply is the 12th of November. So just make sure that you get going with your application and submit by a deadline. But best of luck to everyone. If you've got any other further pressing questions, you can contact us at info@creativeaccess.org.uk. That's info@creativeaccess.org.uk. But yeah, best of luck and have a great rest of your week. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.